This podcast is intended to provide information for educational purposes only and to serve as a starting point for you to have a conversation with your personal physician. Nothing stated on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Consult with your physician before undertaking or changing any treatment plan.
Prep and Prosper, Meal Prep Secrets with Kristen Willard. Welcome, Kristen. Super glad to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, you are known on Instagram as what? What's your Instagram handle?
My handle is Bariatric Meal Prep. So they put bariatric.meal.prep.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, I find that so many patients post-op, but also just people in general on a weight loss journey really struggle with meal planning and meal prep. So I think it'll be really awesome to hear from you, and we're excited to hear what tips you have. So will you talk to us about if someone just wants to get started with meal prep? It's kind of a daunting task. So what are some just starting steps that you recommend?
Yeah, so I love getting to know a patient or a client beforehand to kind of see where they are at. But kind of some general tips to get started is I really encourage people to start at the meal that they have the most trouble with planning. So sometimes like lunches, it's already like set, they feel really comfortable with that. And dinners are usually like with friends or family, and they feel okay with that one. But breakfast, they may have a hard time getting in. So I would start with breakfast, or we can kind of look at it as the meal that's the most challenging to eat within your health guidelines. Start with that meal first, and then not necessarily do like, we see on Instagram, we see on TikTok, all these beautiful arrays of these meal prep meals, but that's not necessarily always realistic. So really just starting with like one recipe to start. I'm all about building your confidence so that this is something that you feel like you can do. So one of my big mottos is like, keep it super simple overall.
Yeah, I like that. And so I like what you were saying about keeping it simple. We can build upon it later, start with what you're struggling with. And I find that also another barrier besides just getting started is time and convenience. And so many people just don't have enough time in the day or don't have that 6 hours on Sunday to do everything. Right. So what are some of your favorite meal prep, time saving, convenience tips in order to, save on that precious time that we can't get back?
Yes. I hate giving up my weekends too to dedicate towards meal prep. So what I really do is there's different styles of meal prep. So as I was saying, like a lot of times you see those pictures on Instagram of like all those, meals prep for the whole week. But I really overall, in my personal approach, with my schedule, I do more like prep ingredients. So I may make chicken for one meal and then I'll make extra for another meal later. So for instance, if you've had bariatric surgery, you could do some chicken, like with some, maybe cook it in a slow cooker with some salsa, get some salsa chicken. And one meal may look like a lettuce wrap. And then like another meal you could add, do it for a salad, or you can add some refried beans on the side to make it a little bit different. One of my favorites, once you get past 6 months and you're really able to tolerate lettuce and more of those raw vegetables better, is to make a bunch of, either chicken or fish, and then change up the salad, like make the same protein, but then change the salad. So you feel like you're getting something different. You can still meal prep it. So you could have one that's more of like an Asian inspired salad, one that's more of a Mexican inspired salad. So you're getting that variety, because I think a lot of people get burned out feeling like they're having like the same meal all the time when they think of meal prepping.
I love that you said that, because one of the questions I wanted to ask was about some strategies people could employ to help them have that variety for people who get sick of eating the same thing all week or think meal prep has to be boring of eating the exact same thing.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, and that's like a real, like, I feel the same exact way. So what I always look at is looking at the flavor. So, as you'll see in a lot of my videos, is more, like I talk about 50% protein roughly, 30% vegetable, 20% carb. And then where we really can make it different is the flavor. So I want flavor always to be a part of that. Flavor is going to be more of your spices. And then I also look at it as it could be some of those extra healthy fats too, like avocado, what you're cooking your meal in, to really make those different flavors. So really knowing your flavor families can be worth, I think, the time to getting to know. So like when you think of like more Mexican food, we're thinking of more chili powder or cilantro or onions. When we're thinking of more like an Asian inspired meal, we're thinking of like more of like a soy sauce or ginger, onions there too. And so how can you take these very similar meals in like the major components, and then how can we switch the flavor up? Different sauces can help. So you're getting that variety.
I love that. What are your thoughts on the kind of already ready to go seasoning blends like Mrs. Dash or something like that?
Yeah, I think that they're a great place to start. And so I find that they actually kind of get expensive, but you can absolutely like start there. I know a lot of places are worried about like sodium and whatnot. So it's always important to talk to your guidelines because I feel like some surgery centers are more strict on that than others. I tend to look more at the actual food itself. So like really focusing on that protein and the veggies. And I don't worry about sodium as much in my personal practice. I think it's important to pay attention to like how much processed foods you're having, but I feel like salt from the actual salt, salting it is really not as much of a concern as like when you're going out to eat at a restaurant and they're just dumping a lot of sodium into that. Usually your more home cooked meals, I tend to like not put as much of a focus on the salt content, trying to focus more on the actual whole quality of the meal because I really feel like that's really important.
Yeah, I love that. Most Americans aren't over high, over 2 times the amount of sodium they need to take because of dumping salt on it
Yeah.
because of the processed food.
As soon as you move away from processed food, your salt intake is cut to a third probably. And so if you start adding salt onto that, you're still going to most likely be eating far less salt than you were before.
Right.
So I think we tend to be a little liberal. I mean, salt doesn't cause obesity. It's certainly not a great thing to be eating tons of salt, but I think if salting your vegetables makes you eat more vegetables, it's probably a worthwhile trade.
Exactly. And as you both know, like in the medical field, it's really about the potassium and sodium like balance. And so when we're having those vegetables, a lot of times you're going to be having increased potassium, which is a great way to kind of balance out the amount of sodium that you may be taking in. But really trying to still be moderate and and absolutely follow your surgeon's guidelines.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned prepping ingredients, but I wanted to talk about specifically veggies. So favorite ways to maybe prep veggies that both help save time and is convenient, but also if you have any favorite veggie recipes or veggie preps for people who might not be as excited to eat vegetables but want to try some new and fun ways to incorporate the veggies.
Yeah, so definitely start with the veggies that you like the most and learning how to um, include them into meals that you may have. So, like for instance, like if you are a carrot person, then starting off with like putting carrots as your side dish, for your having a lunch meal, adding that to like your lettuce. If you want to like prep your food ahead of time, like onions are one of my favorite things to just like prep up an onion. You don't need a lot of recipes call for like 1 or 2 tablespoons, but like chop up the whole onion, keep it in your fridge so that you're able to take it out later for maybe another meal. I really like prepping lettuce, especially like romaines and like kale, where you can cut it up ahead of time and then keep it in an air can't talk in an airtight bag, and then you can add it to things throughout the week. Because I find with vegetables, one of the hardest things is that it does take time to prep. So if you're able to do more at one time period, then you're really saving that time in the week where maybe you could be spending more time with family. Maybe you could be going out for exercising. If you find it challenging to prep vegetables, then I think frozen vegetables absolutely can have a place in someone's diet after surgery, definitely in the soft food phase. And then after that, adding it to stir fries, like that's one of my favorite ways to use frozen vegetables. They're already chopped up for you. If you have the means, I think getting pre-cut vegetables in the produce section can also be a really great way to make sure that you are getting those vegetables in. As far as like recipes are concerned, that's a real on the spot question. I really like adding vegetables to things that I like. So for instance, like I think like ricotta bake is a pretty popular recipe. So like a way that you can add that is you already are getting tomatoes and the tomato sauce, but maybe you can add some frozen spinach to the ricotta. So you're getting just a little bit more extra vegetables there. You can do like more of if you're into tofu, that's a great way to try to get some extra fiber and then protein, and then add some stir-fried frozen vegetables to that as well. One of my favorites, and actually my kids' favorites, and they're not total veggie lovers, so I don't want to make it seem that way, is baked kale. They love baked kale. I love baked kale. I think that just really helps take I don't know, because kale definitely has a strong flavor, but I feel like when it's baked with a little bit of salt, it tastes so good with some olive oil and tastes really good.
Okay, so you got to tell our listeners how, like, what temperature, how long we're gonna need. We're gonna need to know.
So air frying it has become one of my favorite ways to make it, which is you can still do the same thing roasting, but when I recently got a new oven last year, and so it has that air fry function on it, but you can do this in your regular, air fryer as well. I cut it up really like small, so chop it, and then I take some olive oil and just lightly coat the entire thing, and then you can add some a little bit of salt to it. If you like it spicy, you can even add a little sriracha to it and blend it in there, and then put it into the oven. I really kind of mix it up every time. I probably should look at like a for real recipe, but I do it anywhere between 400 to 450, and then I check on it like every 5-10 minutes. Like it like once you hit 5 minutes, you probably should be checking it like every 2 minutes because it can really get burned really quickly. But if you are between 5 and 10 minutes, if you want like a rough guideline.
Like pine nuts, right? Yeah, pine nuts. You got like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Trader Joe sells them dry roasted, which is a good thing. So what about kids? It sounds like you've got a family. How do you when someone is post-op and they want to change their lifestyle and they've got to integrate this with their children. So what are some strategies that people can use so that they can add these healthy habits to their family's life? Because it's really hard to just eat totally separate from the rest of your family.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say that before I had kids, I definitely, was always like, don't worry, always have them eat the same meal as you. And I definitely have changed my ways with the reality of having kids over the years. But what I really try to do is make sure that like, we're having like the same protein. And I usually, since I feel like kids usually really tend to like more carbohydrate foods, there's usually like some sort of like carbohydrate there. So whether that's going to be like potatoes or bread, something that I know they're going to eat, because a lot of times kids, when there's something on the table that they know they like, they're going to be usually more receptive to trying new things. I find that kids are also kind of resistant. If you say, oh, you need to have that, you need to try it, it's important. Sometimes they're more resistant, but you can be, having fun little things like, oh, what is the texture like to you? Like asking them questions about it or engaging them in the prep work can actually be really helpful. If you are someone who likes to farm or, to garden, having them involved in that can be helpful. But really trying to come from the standpoint of always including a food that they like on their meal. And then I like to introduce like a new food. So if you're introducing a new food, always have another food there that that they like, so that feel like they have something. Children are, and I'm not a pediatrician, dietitian, but they're really in tune with their bodies and how much they need. So some nights, my kids will have like a lot of food, and other nights they'll have like 1 or 2 bites. So I really try to honor where their bodies are at and that they're learning to trust their bodies. Because I think we can, be controlling of kids as well. So we want to try to have them make those decisions for themselves as much as possible. There's I don't know if she's a doctor. I don't think she's a doctor, but her name is Ellen Satter, and she talks about the division of responsibility, where it's our job to put the food on the table as parents, and it's up to the child to decide how much they're going to have. So really, you are the gatekeeper when it comes to the food and making those choices, but then they get to decide how much they want to feed themselves.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've had patients sit down and say, well, my entire childhood, I was forced to eat everything on my plate, and basically they were forced to eat.
Yep.
And it just kind of cascaded from there. And they developed an unhealthy relationship with food, and it led to a lot of overeating as an adult. So I think that's a great take-home message, which is that kids get to decide how much they eat. How do you handle kind of kids' desires for sweets and candy, and the kid, I think we've all witnessed this where your child is like takes 3 bites of dinner and then goes and grabs ice cream or something like that. Like, how do you manage that? Where obviously that's not a healthy behavior, and we have to step in as parents and kind of direct the kids back to a healthier eating style.
Yeah, so there's I do follow some other like pediatrician dietitians online, like Kids Eat in Color, I think is one of my favorite accounts to follow. And so they're like one of her strategies, and I've experimented. I think it once again, like there's no right way to do this. It's really about discovering what works for you and your family. Sometimes you can even put like a little bit of dessert like on the actual dinner table, so it takes away the power of the dessert food. So part of your meal. That can be one way to do it. Another way is that once again, you are the parent and you can decide like what kind of desserts you're going to have. So you can offer them like chocolate covered like bananas, for instance, or you can make like homemade popsicles yourself and have more control over the ingredients. We can, have more limits as far as like the amount, like if you want, you have like smaller cups. Like I find that if you have smaller, smaller portion containers, sometimes that helps like reduce the actual amount of the food. Sometimes if you give a kid a big bowl, of course they're going to want that bowl all the way filled up. But if we do, like a smaller bowl, there's more of the perception that there's more. So that can be another way. And really trying to model a healthy relationship with food yourself. And I think that's, really important as the parent to, I'm just not hungry yet, or I'm still full from dinner. So really trying to model that behavior also can be helpful. And then also not necessarily shaming the food, like when you do have dessert as the parent, like, oh, I'm going to have to work this off, or I shouldn't be doing this, because like kids are really perceptive, and they tend to start with more of that internalized shame, like, oh, I shouldn't be having this, or this isn't good for me. And so that can create another thing. So I think there is a balance there, and each family has to find their own. And there's definitely some great pediatric dietitians that can help people with that, because I think it's hard. I think it can be challenging when you're trying to repair your own relationship with food, and you're also trying to raise your kid to have a healthy relationship with food. So sometimes you need a little bit of help with that, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, I love that. I always say, kids, they don't listen to a thing you say, but they watch everything you do like a hawk. And really it's the modeling that's the best way to get your children to eat healthy. And so I think that's a great extension, because that fits very naturally with what we're trying to do after bariatric surgery. Another quick question. I'm a gadget guy and I love to cook, but I love, like, I have every kitchen gadget there is. Give us like 3 just must-have meal prep gadgets that just save you time and make this a much easier job.
I would say, especially for someone having surgery, that an Instant Pot or as like a slow cooker is a great one to have on hand. You can make like some nice kind of more stew-like soups for early on. And then they also work really well for more like dump and prep meals for later in your journey. That's one I still use a lot. I feel like Instant Pot like had a rage back in, I don't know, 2015 to 2020. I don't
Hmm.
see it as much around
Now it's all about the air
it.
We
It's
all
fryer.
also
have
known
one and they
as
last. I still have the same one. It's like
Yeah,
10
me
years
too.
old, right?
Yes, I think they're great tools. One of the ones that have really come up in my usage lately is, have you guys seen those Full Star? I think they're called Full Star. They're choppers. And so they really have made my prep work with chopping go so much faster, like with things like onions or carrots. Like speaking of kids, like I find kids eat things when you cook them up, like when you chop things really small. So that's another great way to make it all uniform, nice, nice sizes. And then you can add that to your veg, or add it to salads later during the week. And so that's really nice there too. And then a blender, like I know that's probably a really boring one, but like a nice blender, I think like Vitamix, the Ninja blenders work good, just because you are creating a lot of different sauces, or not different. You can create sauces, but you're having protein drinks, in the beginning, and that can be a really nice tool to make your food like kind of more uniform texture as well, and smooth.
Love it. I think there's so many great tips and advice here, and we really appreciate you sharing. I know our listeners are gonna
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
love what you had to say. What are you working ahead to if people want to kind of interact more with you? What's going on over in your world?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Please follow me at Bariatric Meal Prep. And then definitely check out my website. I have some free resources there, just different articles. And then like kind of the big thing that's coming up in my world is the Bariatric Symposium. So it is a 3-day free event that's all virtual this year. This is now my 5th one hosting. And so each year we just keep layering on new things. And last year was the first year we offered it for free. So it's previously always been like a paid event. This year we're offering it for free again. And then you have up to 48 hours to watch the recordings, which is really cool because last year you had to attend live. So this year you have access to the recordings for 48 hours. There's over 19 professionals that are going to help you like keep your momentum going, keep your progress. Cause I know, sometimes we have these little humps, when you're going through a journey, and it's normal to go up and down. And so really the purpose of the Bariatric Symposium is to get you inspired, get you education in regards to how to fuel yourself. We have some really great speakers this year that are talking about nutrition for muscle building in particular, because that can really help with your long-term metabolism. Mindset for maintenance. I think that's, not talked about enough as far as like the maintenance phase. I think we just have so much talk about just that first year and then regain later, but we can also, let's talk about maintenance. Things about shopping. I'm going to be doing a meal prepping presentation as well. So just a lot of variety that people can really get a lot of use out of.
Wow, that sounds incredible. Very valuable.
How do we sign up?
You go to bariatricmealprep.com. You could also Google Bariatric Symposium. I think it does show up in the Google search, and it should come up for you to be able to register for that. Or you can go to my profile on Instagram, and it will be in my link in my bio.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, Kristen, I tell you, I love this session. Such an amazing wealth of information. But what I particularly love about what you're doing is that, we tend to, I think, over emotionalize food and make it like this whole spiritual thing. And it's all about mindset. And if I don't have, and again, there's a component to that, but there's also a lot of practical tips that just make it easier to make better choices. And it's very pragmatic, and it kind of takes some of the emotion out and just makes us hey, here are some good tips so that you can eat healthier. And you find that once you arm yourself with a bunch of these tips and learn a couple of strategies, it just becomes so much easier to follow these healthy diets and to change your life. And so I love what you're doing, kind of just coming at this from a simple, straightforward angle that's giving people the tools they need to make these changes. So kudos to you. And I think anybody out there, that symposium sounds like a really great option. I love that you've made it free.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great thing for our patients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It has really good energy to it. Like, even though the recordings are going to be here this year, I definitely encourage live. Like, live is just, it's just the magical sort of energy.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see everybody out there. Please check out the symposium and check out Kristin on Instagram and her website.